Hello and welcome to this week's episode of How to Be a Great GM. My name is Guy and today we're going to be looking at creating our own monster within or for use in our own games. Now, as this is a new year and we're still exploring what January 2022 is going to bring us, remember you can gather experience points throughout this entire episode by watching out for them. They will pop up, or I will say you gain 50 experience points, and you can keep a running total, at the end of which keep a track, and over the year you're going to accumulate experience points until eventually you can claim them to claim your right as being a truly great GM. Now, when it comes to creating our own monsters, we have to take into consideration a few things and avoid certain pitfalls. Now, of course, some of those pitfalls are very obvious and some of them are not so obvious. When we come to designing a monster, the very first question, the fundamental question that you must answer before you answer all other questions, the very first question you have to ask is, what is its function? Why do we have this monster being created in the first place? Is there not a monster already in existence? Now, if you are one of those GMs who feel that you cannot possibly use the statistics from one monster and simply reskin it and call it something else, then you are already in a bad space. As far as I'm concerned, if you have a monster's manual for whatever system you're using, and it's given you a whole bunch of values, why not just draw from those values but reskin the monster? On the other hand, if you want to create something from scratch, well, that is a journey that you can go on. You're welcome to do that. Make sure that you follow the rules for monster creation, because most role-playing systems have got rules for creating your own monsters. But they don't have rules for creating your own monster. They have rules for statistics, not for the monster itself. So we have to answer some questions. So the first one is function. So the function of our monster. We might need a monster to be a scary creature that lurks in caves. Or we might need the monster to be some kind of cloud shark, something that flies through the air and acts like a shark in the clouds because we're running an aerial campaign and they don't have flying sharks as a monster in the role-playing system that you're using. So you might want to create some kind of flying sharky thing. Maybe you want to make Sharknado, because that could be a cool encounter, right? But it has to have a function. So the function is within your game, right? You then will later on figure out all the minutiae as I'm getting ahead of myself here, so let me slow down. Right. Now, we need to understand the function of the creature. With that in mind, we then take our first step, which is to physically describe the monster. What does it look like? And now I'm going to tell you this, and if you remember this, this will give you 75 experience points. All right? When you are creating this monster, unless you are an amazingly fabulous artist who has the skills of Michelangelo himself, unless you have those kind of abilities, do not try to draw the creature and then present it to your players. Why? Well, fundamentally, if you allow your players to imagine the beast that you are about to describe to them, if they have to use their own imagination, it creates within their own head a whole bunch of very different memories, because they are drawing on the clues that you are giving them and they are forming a composite picture. If you hold up a picture of a monster that you created and you have either drawn it, and even if you are Michelangelo with amazing artist skills, or you have found an amazing image that has been generated on the internet and you have legally downloaded it and approached the artist for the rights to use the image in your game, of course we all do that. If you have done all of that and you show the picture to your players are no longer creating the image in their head, they are now absorbing the image, they are remembering a picture that you have shown them. Do you see the difference? Remembering a picture that you've shown them or constructing the beast in their own heads? There is a lot more tangibility to the one that they've had to build in their own head than to simply be presented with an image. In other words, we are actively engaging their brains as opposed to simply passively showing them something. So I will always advocate that you don't show it to them until you have described it to them. Let them build up this image in their head of this 8-legged wolf, hairy-like creature with large fangs and a big snout, and you're like, what the hell does this thing look like? But they are busy building an image in their head, and then once they've kind of got the image, then you can go, oh, and here's the stick figure that I drew earlier, which shows you what I think this thing looks like. But by then they've already compiled it in their head, and they've got an idea of what they're fighting. So that is the very first rule, number 1, when it comes to talking about our monsters after we've decided upon their function. The next thing that we have to do is we have to talk about the physical. What is it like? What is this creature like physically? Draw me like one of your little French, handcrafted or genuine, authentic cow milking stools. Really, it's about making sure that the physical aspect of this creature is fulfilling the function of the creature within our space. So if we wanted a creature to be a flying air shark that brings with it terror, then we need to make sure that physically we are describing something that doesn't look like a white fluffy cloud, and then the white fluffy cloud opens and has teeth. Although that is an interestingly comical kind of creation, we need it to bring terror. Its function is to bring terror in the skies. So how are we going to do that physically? Well, if we think about the creature, if we think about a shark, the most terrifying thing about a shark is seeing the fin first or feeling the bump against your leg in the water. That gives us a sense that this thing is arriving and has seen us and is interested in us. So we need to have that. So somehow the players need to be able to see this disruption of this creature before it attacks so that they can build tension. They can feel the terror as it's approaching. So perhaps we go, well, actually, the fin of this particular shark-like creature, the fin, most of the time, the creature is actually invisible. It has the translucency of, well, it is translucent, it's see-through, it's glass-like, and so you know that the creature is around when clouds suddenly get cut in half because the fin has moved through. So you see this weird tail, this fin-like projection from the cloud as the invisible fin has passed through it and dragged some of the cloud with it. It creates this fin-like. So suddenly the cloud starts to produce a fin. And the player's like, hang on, isn't that caused by those invisible shark things? Yes, it is. So physically, we're trying to figure out how to manifest the function of the creature. Sharks have large teeth, lots of teeth in giant mouths. That's their big trick, right? They don't have tentacles, they don't have grappling things, they just have these big mouths. When I think of a shark in the sky, I wanted to portray terror. So our shark is invisible. It can split clouds. So that means that it needs to be really big. Like really big. So I then think the most terrifying thing that a shark of that size could then do would be to slap you. I know it sounds ridiculous, but hear me out. If this shark has a particular technique whereby it suddenly hits the side of the vessel, the airship, or the person flying, and that disables their ability to fly, they are now falling. So they start falling out of the sky. And then this maw opens up of teeth that they're going to just fall into. The creature isn't actively attacking them. It's just slapping them around and then opening its mouth and waiting for them to fall in. I think that's kind of terrifying. I mean, this is one way that you could take it. You could take a whole bunch of different approaches, right? It's all about fulfilling the function. So if this creature then has these large blade-like tentacles, I don't know why it's tentacles, but it's protuberances, right? It has these large protuberances that just waft in the wind. This is kind of becoming more like a sea anemone than a shark, but those are pretty terrifying too. Do you see where we're going? So describe the physicality, work out the physical attributes of the creature based on its function. Once you're finished with the physical attributes of this creature, you can score 100 XP, but also then we need to look at the psychological makeup. What is in this creature's mind? It needs to tell us, what does it think about its mother? No, it doesn't. It doesn't need to do any of that whatsoever. We need to understand the creature in terms of Psychologically, how do the players need to react, or how do the player characters need to react to this creature? With terror, with fear, with revulsion, with disgust? Think about all of the words that you would want the players to say when they come across this creature. Does it have large sphincters all over its sides, which occasionally open up and release out of them this sort of yellowish pus-like ooze that coats the creature, and that's what causes it to become invisible, and that ooze drips down onto the decks of ships, causing holes to appear in the ship? There aren't holes, it just causes the ship to start having patches that start disappearing. They're still there, but they're covered in ooze. Wash the ooze away and the stuff comes back. Adventurers immediately are going to go and hunt these poor creatures to extinction because of the invisibility potion that they basically are oozing. But the point is the psychology that we want the players to feel when they start hearing about this creature. So we're going to try and drive that. We're going to use words. We're going to create physical functions of this creature that create the psychological impact. Once we're done with that, that's 150 experience points for you. We then move on to the next step, which is how do these things hunt? I've kind of started describing it already with these sharks swimming through the clouds, causing and bumping things to cause things to fall, so then they can just fall into the open mouths of these creatures. We can take and explore things in different directions. That's entirely up to you. But how do they hunt? How do they survive? If they are grazers, do these sharks actually just eat the air, eat the clouds and the insects that are in the clouds? So they filter feeders, they're basking sharks, and they just wander around enveloping an entire cloud and anyone who's inside of it. That could be terrifying. A whale shark in the air that just opens its mouth and just swallows everything and doesn't care about what's around. That could be truly, truly terrifying. Although it does feel less psychologically personal. So from a terrifying perspective, part of terror is this thing is hunting you specifically. So I would argue that maybe that's just a little bit too oh, what's the word? Help me out. You know what I mean. It's just a little bit too arbitrary, so it's not malicious. It's just random act. So I don't like that idea, so scratch that. We'll take it out. And by the way, this is something that you're going to be doing in this process, is you're going to create the monster, change it, adjust it, think it, talk it through, work it through, change it again, come back to it, all that kind of stuff. So how does it hunt? How does it feed? How does it survive? And then finally, what hunts it? What predates upon it? What will kill this thing? So is it kryptonite like Superman, which is a ridiculous idea in the very first place, because it means that if that's the only thing that can harm this creature, then the player characters are going to just have that all the time, and they're never going to do anything other than just use that. So it makes it a very one-dimensional monster. If, on the other hand, it has an aversion to fire, we know a lot of animals are afraid of fire. Well, what if this creature knows that fire means that there are humans around, because humans make fire, and so it's drawn to fire, like a kind of shark moth thing that's now cutting through the air and is attacking anything that looks like it's on fire, and so the inner lining of its mouth is now fire resistant. It's an interesting thing. I'm not entirely sure where it's going, but I'm giving you the tools so that you can make sensible choices. I'm just spitballing here in front of a camera, so, throw me a freaking bone here. Give me some slack, all right? Now, once we've worked out its weaknesses, we've generally got this pretty interesting creature. Now we can go and pull stat blocks from an existing monster, or we can make our own stat blocks so that this creature has some kind of mathematical value to your game, because we want to comply with all of those kind of rules. But now we have this creature. The important thing when you are introducing this creature to your players is a lot of players will be expecting that you use pre-created monsters. And a lot of players I have played with in the past have taken pride in knowing the stats of almost every monster in the monster's manual. And you're going, that's a lot of really useful information for you to have as a player. No, I'm being serious. Can't you see on my face? This is my serious face. It's so great. Anyway, so make sure that your players know that you will be using homebrew monsters if your players are like that. My players know by now that there is no such thing as the Monsters Manual in my games. I use it as reference only, and I will never use the statistics. If I need a troll, my trolls will never just be the stock standard troll. Point in case, my players were fighting against rock trolls the other day, which had the surface, their skin was covered in rock, and whenever they were stabbed, they kind of bled out this rust-like dust, which would rust iron and stuff like that. The regeneration didn't have a thing. They didn't have any kind of fire resistance, but they're called rock trolls in my world. So that's a very simple kind of example. Anyway, so you now have all of the tools to make your own monster, and that is your task for today. Create a monster. Give us its describe it to us. Give us the function. Give us the psychology behind this thing. What words are you going to use to describe it? And then finally give us how it hunts and what feeds upon it, what scares it in the night. Is it maybe bacteria? Is it virus? Is it some kind of other bigger creature? Tell us where this thing sits within the ecology of your world, and then we can commit that down. And that's pretty much it, folks. That will get you 300 experience points, because creating a monster is cool, I reckon. And, you know, we can all use these monsters in our own games, and what a wonderful experience that will be. Today's video was sponsored by Dungeon Fog in an upcoming video, we'll be looking at designing a monster's lair using Dungeon Fog. And Dungeon Fog, of course, is a map-making piece of software. It's so much more than just a map maker. It is a really, really cool piece of technology, and I thoroughly recommend that you go and check it out. I use it on a weekly basis for all of my maps. I really, 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 really do. So go and check them out. Use the code GreatGM for a massive discount if you want to sign up for a monthly subscription thing. I suggest you do, because you get free props every second month, and thousands and thousands of props across all genres, whether you are fantasy or sci-fi or modern or Victorian or Gothic or steampunk, whatever, they've got it. They really have a massive collection. Big thank you to them. Massive thank you to you for watching all the way through to the end. And here's a bonus 50 experience points for you, just because you stayed until the very, 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 very end. And a big thank you to my patrons, of course, wonderful patrons who support this channel. Until next time, I wish you and yours the very happiest of gaming.